Enjoy a seat at the table and good company, where great conversations and meaningful discussions happen.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholtz. We all know a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people seated around the table engaging in lively discussions. And Good Company gives you a seat at the table to enjoy smart and interesting conversations as they happen. I am pleased to be in the company of Jennifer Norris-Hale, the founder and director of Mission Motherhood. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I want to talk to you a little bit, we were talking a little bit before we started, about the fact that you're from here.
Yes.
And then, but then you actually went away to New York.
Yes.
And you came back about 10 years ago?
About 5 years ago.
5 years ago, okay.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about what was that experience like from when you left Fort Wayne and you went to New York? What was that whole transition, and what do you feel that gave you in your life experiences?
Oh my goodness. So when I went to IU and I started as a history major, so we're going to go back a little bit, but I was like, I don't really think this is going to work. I really wanted to travel. That's like my biggest passion, was to travel. And I really liked business, but I didn't want to get too integrated in it. So I found apparel merchandising. And so I thought, well, maybe I can be a buyer, I can travel, work in big cities and that sort of thing. And so it was a really great fit. I had an internship my junior year. It was out in New York, and I fought for it. I literally called the owner of the company like once a week, every other day. Like, do you have any update? I really want to be there. And they made a position for me because they knew I wanted to be there. And you have this concept in your head of New York, of Friends, or, everything that you see on TV. And there's some really great pros to New York and being there, the culture, the people, the access to everything. And it was really great, but at that time it was also just overwhelming. But I was young and I was in my 20s and wanted to be there, and I was ready to go. So when I graduated, I got a job at the company that I interned with, and and it was just, I hit the ground running. I showed up at like 7 in the morning. I didn't leave until 7 o'clock at night, and I worked hard and I played hard, and that's what you do when you're there.
In your 20s.
Yeah. Exactly. And it was a culture shock. I think there was, it wasn't easy. There was probably 6 months where I called my parents every day. I was like, I don't know if this is really what I want to do. But my parents, you don't have to, they'd always say, like, you can always come home. And once I started to get a group of friends, then everything kind of changed.
And what do you think were the big takeaways from that time, or what did you learn about yourself?
I learned that I was much stronger than I believed, honestly. Like, I think there was a lot of people who I've always been just a very genuine, nice person, but they didn't think that I could be assertive and aggressive. And when I
thought they would eat you for lunch and spit you out in New York.
Oh no.
Right.
When your job's on the line, when you're working with very powerful individuals, you learn the ropes very quickly. And I was very fortunate to work alongside some very amazing negotiators, and people who actually cared about me and my job, but also, the work that we were doing. So I wasn't a designer. I didn't do that end,
Right.
but I worked in operations and manufacturing. So we would work with the factories
overseas, and
that sort of thing. So with that, I got to travel as well, and that was probably 75% of why I was doing what I was doing, because I was able to go to Bangladesh, India, El Salvador.
So do you think that's where you got the bug for giving back and wanting to do something for others?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I think I always wanted to, but I really, in New York, you kind of have to have an ego and really let that ego kind of control where I was going, because I would come back home and people at a certain point, I worked in the Empire State Building, and that was like a really big deal, and especially for a family.
Right. Well, that was the heart of the fashion district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was always just such a big deal, and so I always, still kind of conflicted of whether I wanted to come home or when would be the right time. It was always like nothing can compare to what I was doing.
Right. And then when you did come back, so we're going to backtrack. We'll go back to about for Mission Motherhood. But when you first came back, you started a company called The Greater Good, right? Yeah. And what was the impetus and purpose of that?
So when I came back, I had been gone, like really gone for 10 years, coming back and forth. But I was fortunate to work for Sweetwater and then Matilda Jane, both very Sweetwater, obviously philanthropic, and Matilda Jane as well. The founder was extremely philanthropic. And so I just really connected with that source of giving. And as an outsider now, I realized that there weren't a lot of spaces or places in the community where the community could, connect to nonprofits. So you had to either know of the nonprofit, be supporting it, or really just go out of your way. And when you went out of your way, where do you go?
Right.
And so I just really wanted to create this platform called The Greater Good. It was a Facebook page, and then be able to just share, not exclusively to one nonprofit, but to promote everything that they're doing.
Right.
Yeah. And so it was really well received, and it was a really great opportunity as well to kind of start connecting in the nonprofit community. Mm-hmm. So that's really where that started, and that was just kind of the seed that got planted for everything else.
And was there an issue when you looked at creating The Greater Good that what's the business model like for you to make a living?
Yeah.
And sort of, how do you do that?
Yes, that was probably the biggest kind of, I guess, almost stalemate for The Greater Good, because yes, people want to promote and there are ways, there's membership, there's membership models and that sort of thing. And I explored them all, but it just didn't seem like everyone loved the concept, but nobody really felt, where's the investment?
Right.
Where's the return on investment?
Right. So how did you pivot to, because partly the experiences your personal experiences for Mission Motherhood happened, that would be 10 years or 5 years prior to that. So what was the impetus let's start from here currently, and then how it evolved. But what was it that made you take a look at the experiences that you had with the birth of your first son, that made you want to connect from The Greater Good to create this Mission Motherhood?
It was actually in 2019, I applied to do a TEDx talk. And the initial talk I laid out was community engagement. So I really wanted to talk about, community engagement and collaboration.
I just got rejected from doing it. I wanted to do a TED talk before. I got rejected because they really wanted you to show your expertise in something.
Well, when you have so many expertise, it's really...
No, it was really that my joke was I'm not qualified to do a TED talk. So that was the whole philosophy of my TED talk. But anyway, so you just wanted, was it like me? You just always wanted to do one, or you...
I just wanted to share my thoughts, and somebody, I think we were just talking about, you're thinking about your business and ways to TEDx or the TEDx talk. You're really not supposed to promote anything. Right. Promote yourself. Right. So
the theme was connection and community?
It was, I forget what the theme actually was.
I think it was. So then it was. So then you talked to them about what you wanted to talk about, or okay.
So I found out the day that I had my third son that my TEDx proposal was.
But you were accepted.
Yeah, I was like, yay, woo, which was exciting. And then, so a few weeks later, I'm really thinking about how I want to, put this all together. And I was looking at my son, and I was like, nobody really talks about postpartum depression. And I felt like my first two children were born in New York. My first one, I experienced postpartum depression.
So tell me that, how that manifested itself and what happened.
Postpartum depression?
Yeah, with your first son.
Okay.
Yeah. What you talked about in the TED Talk. See, we're getting around circle to it. Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
So I had my first, going back to being in your 20s, hit the ground running, career. I went to New York. You can ask my mom and sister. They can validate that they never thought that I would be a mom. It was just not in my cards. It's not that I didn't want to. It was just not something that...
Well, right then you were focused on your career. When you're in New York City, that's,
what you do.
You're driven. I mean...
And so I ended up, it was probably about 5 years into being in New York. I was in love.
With your now husband?
Ex-husband.
Oh, ex-husband, okay.
But I found out I was pregnant, and so it was really just this, like, total mind shift from the beginning.
Now, because I wanted to ask you, so, but prior to having your children, were you ever around children? Like, did you babysit? Did you have anyone who had babies before? Because this is important to the story. So I'm just curious, did you babysit or be experienced to babies and kids before?
I did babysit in like high school.
Okay.
And my sister she didn't have 5 kids at the time, but she had younger kids. And I would leave and I would be like, I just want to be not this.
Right. Well, I say the best gig is an aunt.
Yeah.
Because you can be overly involved, you can do what you want, and then you get to leave them and you go back to your life.
Yeah, and I thought, how cool when they grow up, they can visit me in New York.
You'll be the cool aunt.
Yes, exactly. And so that's kind of like where my head was at. And I mean, when we make plans, God laughs. Like that's kind of my life motto.
And I always have had several conversations with God about knock it off. Yeah. I get it. You got a sense of humor, but enough. Yeah.
Not enough.
Right.
But so I found out I was pregnant, and while I was excited, and I had my partner at the time, we worked at the same company, and it was just a lot. And so, but I didn't there wasn't another choice. I don't know how to share that. It felt like a lot, but it was like what I had. I don't want to say what I had to do either.
But it's what you wanted to do. You wanted to become a mother, even though it wasn't on your trajectory at the time. And
exactly. So we prepared. So then I'm like, okay, if I'm going to be a mom, I'm going to do this.
Because you're someone who really, you decided you were going to New York. You called the guy every other week. I mean, you have a plan.
Yes.
I mean, you're a planner, and you're like, okay, if there's something put in front of you, you're going to tackle it. So I think you sort of approach motherhood and being pregnant like, okay, I got this. Yeah. I'm going to tackle it. I got a plan.
Totally. I wanted to do a natural birth. That's how it was going to go. I had a doula, and she was supportive of that. I didn't think I'd have a C-section. We didn't even talk about it because we want to have positive thoughts in our mind, which totally fine.
And you believe that even though by that time you really were in a New Yorker, there wasn't the cynical person in you?
Yes, because I'm still my Midwestern sweetheart or whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, so time came. My son, I started to have chest pain, kind of backing up a little bit. I did switch doctors around my 3rd trimester, and so I went from OBGYN to a midwife, which was great, but things kind of got lost in translation. So,
but you also had a medical emergency.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I mean, you got preeclampsia, which is like your heart blood pressure just skyrockets, and then it's.
And I had HELLP syndrome as well, which kind of showed itself through. I had really bad, at that time, chest pain. And so it was just a medical emergency, and I was not prepared for a medical emergency. No one is. And I think I mentioned this a while ago too, like when you have a baby, no one ever tells you that you could die or your baby could die. That's just not even in the realm of possibility, because we don't want to scare, but
you want to have those positive thoughts.
You want to have the positive thoughts and that sort of thing.
But it is a reality that it's still a significant number of women, even in the United States, die from childbirth.
Yeah, absolutely. And having that support around you and that knowledge and education.
And your family was not there because they were here, right, in Fort Wayne.
Yeah. They drove through the night to New York, which is another really sweet story. But I was admitted. I had an induction, 18 hours. My blood platelets were dropping. The OBGYN finally comes in. He's like irate. This had even gone on for so long. And he called an emergency C-section, and that was it. And so it was just a whirlwind. And it was a lot to wrap my head around, becoming a mom, going through the trauma of all of that. For me, the C-section, while it wasn't
it's painful. And that's why you stay in the hospital for a little while, and it's
there's recovery involved. I was sharing the scar. I was really upset with my body because it didn't do what I wanted it to do. I didn't even progress in labor. And I also think because I was so anxious and scared that was also a big part of it. But I never progressed. And so then on top of that, when my son was born, he had low blood sugar, and that's something that I don't really get into, but he was taken to the nursery, so I didn't even get to really hold him.
Well, he was also early, right?
He was actually 40. He was on time.
You were to term. Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
But he was kind of smaller for a term baby, but that was because of the preeclampsia and everything. So he was taken to the nursery for low blood sugar, and then I was in recovery for 3 hours. I remember being on my BlackBerry because I was just like, okay, I'm going to just look at some work emails or whatever.
Meanwhile, you were hyped up on probably some payments, so,
I get an email from my boss, like, you're not supposed to be working.
Right.
And so then I finally get a room, meet my son for the first time, my partner and I meet, or his dad and I meet him for the first time. It's this really beautiful moment. And, later in the evening, still hopped up on pain medicine, and I didn't really recall this until I shared the TEDx talk, because I was kind of thinking about the stages of postpartum depression. A nurse came in the room, and I had just barely had that much time with my son, right? And so, and he also was having a little bit of complications with his blood sugar. Anyway, so he starts crying. I start undressing him, and
because you thought because you were warm, that you thought, and that's a natural mother instinct.
Yeah.
Like, put on a sweater, I'm cold. I mean, it's a natural.
It's a natural thing.
It's like when I see a dog or a baby, and I think that the position they're in, they don't look comfortable.
Yeah.
So I want to fix them.
Yeah.
Even though they could be comfortable, but I think that's not like your head looks odd.
Yes.
So yeah.
It's just this like intuition.
Right. And you got to trust that. I mean, that's the number one thing about being a mother is trust your intuition.
Exactly, and not to be swayed one way or the other, because ultimately you really do know what's going on. So I wanted to do like skin to skin or something with him. Meanwhile, I've got bandages and everything else going on. But anyway, she called to the nursery and she said the mother's not fit to have the baby in the room, and so
because she didn't think that you should be unswaddling the baby.
Yeah, and that it was just kind of a, that maybe the baby needed more attention or care, or that I wasn't able to provide for him at that time. And I didn't really know what to say. And this is a very common experience with women in the hospital. It's like you assume that the professionals know what they're doing, and she could have had a bad day. I don't. I give people a lot of grace, and I don't think that specifically there was anything that she intended for me to think that I was not a fit mother.
Right.
But when those words, were said, those are the words that kind of like hooked everything.
Well, I think it also tapped into what you were sort of maybe, it put a name or an idea to what you were already feeling.
Yeah.
Because, like I believe words matter.
Yeah.
I mean, what you say matters. So I think maybe that's also why, because, you really weren't necessarily planning on having a kid, and then it didn't go the way you thought it should.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, okay, everything I've thought to date is wrong. Maybe I'm really wrong about this. So I think that also sort of put the feeling to what you were feeling, because nobody else was giving it that a name as well.
Exactly. And it was just, and that was the start. And so that was the first night. That day he ended up being in NICU because of the low blood sugar again, so there were complications going into that. But then he started to get better, ended up having jaundice. And I think one of the times that I really was upset about this whole experience was he was in his little incubator getting treated for jaundice, but just alone and crying. And it was just, again, like as a mom, there was nothing I could do. And so that was it was just all these kind of
plus your hormones are raging, and your body is,
exactly.
Really through trauma.
Yeah. So the first 6 weeks or so, it was, it was just kind of like a regular transitional period. My son's father is a wonderful father and a really great partner and active and engaged. And so, but I just you couldn't name the feelings, and I didn't really expect this. I really, I lived in Brooklyn at the time. I really wanted to take him out in his little stroller and we'd go shopping or whatever. And my mom would kind of like laugh at that like ideal motherhood situation, because that's like, there's recovery involved. There's like all these other steps.
Well, and also
involved.
when you have a C-section, you can't pick up the baby. I mean, you can't lift heavy things. And,
There's definitely more recovery involved in that situation.
So you were giving a TED Talk where you were talking about these experiences.
Yes, and I just didn't really think, it's not something that you really talk about with your girlfriends and that sort of thing. And nobody really knew. Because I had family in Fort Wayne, I didn't have that close of friends out there.
Right.
That I was struggling, and I couldn't really identify it either. It went on and went on. At that time, I was also planning a wedding, and so I was really just distracted and focused on that wedding and my work. And
so you went back to work.
Yes. Because that was really something that I enjoyed, like something.
Well, and also I think it's what you thought that women in New York do. Yeah. But they also have a lot of help and support.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we had my son's grandmother was wonderful. She, his dad's family lives in New York, and she's just a wonderful woman. And she took care of him during the day, and she was really somebody who I admired for taking care of him, and I share this too, but she loved him in a way that I hadn't figured. I mean, I loved my son.
Right.
There's like no doubt about that. And even when you're going through that, maybe you can't bond with your child, you still adore and love them.
Well, there's that. It's like that idea when you go from you love someone to truly being in love with them and feel that connection and bond. And for some, it takes longer. And you also had issues with him latching on. But I also think that overriding a lot of this was the expectations that you put on yourself.
Yes.
And the societal expectations that we all believe that society puts on us of how you should be and what type of mother you should be, and you should be able to do all of these things.
Yes.
And so I think that converging is the perfect storm.
Yeah, 100%. And even prior to that too, I was struggling with anxiety, not so much depression, but before I had my son, I was struggling with anxiety. Right. I was going through therapy and stuff like that. And so it just everything compounded.
Mm-hmm. So what was like the breaking point of the...
with my son?
Or no, when you really realized like you needed assistance or help or...
I think it was probably like 3 months out from like our actual wedding date, and I went to my doctor, like he was an internist, and he had been seeing me since I moved to New York, so he knew me pretty well. And I felt anxious, all anxious inside, everything. I was like at the bottom. So I just made an immediate appointment with him, and when I came into the office, he was like, what is wrong? I was like, just kind of like laid it all out. Like, I'm just overwhelmed, and I have this wedding, and I'm a mom, and I'm working, and blah, 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 blah. And it was just so much. And so he prescribed me medication at the time, and that changed everything. Of course, I still had work to do. I had 2 panic attacks, I think, or maybe one after that.
Yeah. And those were dramatic. Let's give it a little credit there.
Yeah.
It was a dramatic panic attack because you got the ambulances, the paramedics to take you out of the Empire State Building. I mean,
it was kind of a big deal.
Right.
And I was like that one. So I was just, again, everything all hit. Right. So you have these kind of moments where I have it under control, and then it just kind of, somebody says the wrong thing, and like everything just blows up. And I was also sick at that time and dehydrated. And it carried out of the Empire State Building on a stretcher, and that was like, what is going on here, Mm-hmm. But once I started, kind of goes back to once I started talking to people about what I was experiencing. Like, my doctor wasn't scared. He was like, moms need help, like moms need wives, or this concept of a wife.
Well, that's also because I was going to ask you about, that's partly what a doula is meant to do, is to be, when you have the baby, but her job is to take care of you as the mother and help you, and by helping you, that helps you take care of the baby.
Yes.
So there is a natural kind of system, although we don't necessarily recognize it as much here. But that is we recognize that mothers themselves, not the baby, mm-hmm. the mother, because the mother knows what to do with the baby, but someone to take care of her.
Yes.
So
in a lot of cultures, that's very common.
Right.
And I think just even now, I had a doula, and that's a whole nother story. And I wouldn't put my doula experience on any doulas, because we have a wonderful community of doulas here.
But I think that a lot of women here in Fort Wayne, but in the United States, don't know about what is a doula and what their purpose is. Because like they know a midwife and they know they have a birth plan, and but they don't know the role of a doula. Yeah. So I mean, if people would recognize that opportunity, that might help a lot of take off some of the pressures and have someone to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially from a postpartum piece of it, and they stay. I don't know exactly how long a postpartum doula would be with you, maybe the first 6 weeks, but that's, it's kind of like this back to basics mentality,
Well, and also because then you're also going through sleep deprivation, you're still healing. I mean, it's a lot. Yeah. And then your hormone, I mean, there's the and then you're supposed to take care of this new little blob, So what was it? So then, So again, you went. So coming back now to 5 years. So you talked about all of these experiences with this in the TED Talk, and you were very honest and frank about your experiences. And then what happened?
So I was kind of going to leave it at that was my experience. Share it so other women can get it and that sort of thing. But then I was able to kind of connect with more people through.
Well, it also resonated, right?
Yeah, and people started to share their stories with me. And one of the people initially that I met that I would just say really kind of started the fire for me, I guess, was Anne Marie Lavenberg. So she is a wonderful woman in the community. She has her own consulting firm called Raise Consulting, and she does a significant amount of research and white papers, and that sort of thing. Just a wonderful individual. She also, around the same time, was sharing her experience with postpartum. So I was like, let's connect and, see what happens. And so I like to take a breath, because when she shared about all of the issues regarding maternal mortality, infant mortality, and how Indiana is so far behind in addressing these issues, it was like I couldn't leave that conversation and be like, okay, well, I guess I don't know what to do. like, how can I help? I mean, it was just one of those conversations where it was like, I can do something. I think I can do something. I don't know at that point exactly what that looked like, but knowing enough about, the nonprofit community and our community growing up and where it was now, that there was a huge gap.
Right, and also because 1 in 7 women will experience postpartum depression.
I think the number is 1 in 5.
1 in 5?
Yeah, because of COVID and all that sort of thing.
But do you think that, like I remember when Brooke Shields had postpartum depression, and then she wrote a book about it, or more recently with Chrissy Teigen and John Legend, when they had a miscarriage, and then there was some when she put some photos out and talked about her experience and the grief, and that because sometimes I think that helps to bring it to the surface. So do you think that from the time that but maybe it hasn't changed that much, because even after this talk you gave, there were all these women who felt that maybe they couldn't name what they had, or felt ashamed, or didn't feel that there was somewhere to go. Would you say that's true, that we still haven't done a good job at sort of bringing this out in the open?
I think we can bring it out to the open, but I don't think that we've done a good job providing resources to help prevent that. So we can talk about it, and we can talk about these experiences, but for the people who are really impacted, I don't think that we've brought enough resources.
Right. And the truth also is that there is a very clear correlation to women who are low income, of those who will experience postpartum depression.
Yes.
So, and that's partly because they don't necessarily have access to the best resources or mental health issues, so then you have to, so that really is also a clear, so it's not just that all women, but there's also segments of women that can't go to a doctor or have access or have any resources.
Exactly. So there's a significant amount of barriers to care for lower income women, minority populations, and that sort of thing, which really needs to be addressed, especially in our own community. And I think what's really great about mental health, what's great about it, is that you can make a difference in your community. And I think, I have a vision for what I want Mission Motherhood to look like, but at the end of the day, it's also educating in the community on how to support a mother who's gone through a loss, right. How to support a mother who might be struggling, like bringing back that village mentality and just planting those seeds and having those conversations.
So, when was it that how long ago was it that you decided to create Mission Motherhood?
It was probably officially about a year ago.
Okay. So you started with wanting to create this initiative, and you started to create the programs. Yeah. So it was, what are the programs that you initially put in place?
So we started initially with just support groups, because one of the reasons that support groups don't carry on was because access to support, the time of them, the consistency of them, that sort of thing. And so I just thought, okay, well, how can we solve that problem? And the YMCA has 5 to 7 locations in Fort Wayne. They are a great community partner, and so I, was in touch with them, and we agreed to do a pilot support group at the Parkview YMCA, and that was just kind of the start. My vision was, and still is, what would be called more of an intensive outpatient program. They have been studied, the success of them as it relates to infant mortality and maternal mortality is I don't want to say exponential, but I'm going to say that because of the care that's provided within them.
Right.
So that still is the ultimate vision for Mission Motherhood, kind of providing a care and wellness center for mothers. But it started with the support groups, and then it started with also surrounding. I wouldn't call myself the expert in maternal mental health. I would call myself a true advocate and someone who can
help. And a warrior.
Exactly. And somebody who has a mission, who's on a mission to.
And also has the wherewithal to wrangle up all the people you need in this team and use those, being a little forceful but polite to get it to happen.
Exactly.
So you brought together the necessary people on your team.
Exactly. And just kind of, got their input and what do we need to do and what does that look like. And another one of the initial community partners was Janelle Lane with Courageous Healing, because again, going back to the fact that in our community we don't have minority-based mental health care. And I really, going back to, again, the numbers for maternal and mental health, that needs to be kind of more at the forefront.
Well, there's also a lot of stigma within some of the communities, ethnic communities, to get mental health.
Yes, exactly. And so just, again, I always talk about planting seeds. I don't, as much as I would love everything to be done overnight or to grow overnight, it is just a constant evolution of where we're going. And so, in having conversations with Janelle, I knew of different programs, evidence-based programs from a national level that we could kind of integrate that were specific towards our Black and Brown moms that would actually help kind of offset their postpartum experience, prenatal and postpartum experience. So along with that, Melissa Hall and I both co-facilitate now 2 different programs, one prenatal and one postpartum, and so that's been awesome. So with Courageous Healing, that was an initial community partner, YMCA, and then so I kind of have all these programs that I've got under my belt. Okay, I've got these things going.
Right.
And then there's another one as I'm just kind of looking around the community and the nation about what's working and how communities are actually making an impact. There was a program in Santa Fe, New Mexico called Many Mothers, and I reached out just to understand what their program was. It's a motherhood mentorship program, and so volunteers are trained. They offer practical, emotional, and support to new moms.
So it's like a doula.
Yeah, an uncertified
doula.
Not so.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But they are.
Or it's like a grandma.
A grandma, or it's
but you don't want your own mother in the room with you. That's not the one.
That's not the one.
Right.
But they are the extended family. So we're trying to create now this new idea of the new extended family, because I have when we launched the program, Just Between Mothers, I initially contacted Associated Churches because I knew that they have a really great volunteer base, a passion for the community.
And they have a lot of programs
Yes.
that help new parents and who have needs for their infants, and
Yeah, and they also would offer wraparound services. They have a lot of connections to other community, So I just thought, if I'm going to do kind of a volunteer-based program, that this would be a really good community partner to have. And so, as I shared more of the vision with Mission Motherhood, it was just kind of like, where do we sign up to to help? And so we started the program Just Between Mothers, and all the volunteers who we have are honestly, it's just so rewarding to see people, and I'm sure all in different, when you're doing social work in different areas and that sort of thing, you just meet some of the most amazing people, and specifically the volunteers that we have, they've gone through their own journey, and they want to go back and help someone else through it. And it's just so much, it's just such a really beautiful partnership and relationship that can be built. And so I'm just excited to see how that grows and builds.
But do you think also that we need to take it beyond just when it's a newborn? Because it's sort of like when you look at children. When they're young, they need you in one way. And when they're a teenager, it doesn't mean that they need you less. They need you in a different way. So as you navigate being a mother, the stages of motherhood, and I remember there was an author, Ayelet Waldman, who wrote an essay about how in her world she loves her husband more than her children. It wasn't saying that she didn't love her children, that she wouldn't die for her children, but she was saying the relationship that she needs to invest the most in is her husband, because at the end of the day, her children will go off and have their own lives, and sort of the backlash that she got from that, and people saying you don't love your children, and being a mother. And so I think also, because although a lot of the expectations that you have when you're having a new baby are maybe what you perceive, real or not, but as your child navigates through, then there's this whole issue of mom shaming and other women. I don't think women are so supportive of women, and I think that then when you have to look at all these other issues that come about with having children at different stages, that I think that it needs to be that it's not that you need a tribe around you the whole way.
Yes.
So is it part of the plan to have the peer-to-peer groups or these mentors that they stay with you, or that you have different kinds of support groups? Because maybe you find out that your child has a learning disability, or maybe you go through a divorce, or so all of these kinds of issues as well. So is it to become more of a of the whole process of being a mother?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you, because, and yes, that kind of is the vision, because you have mothers who have been through NICU, and that's its own experience. You have mothers experience loss, and there's just so many kind of I don't know, pain points sometimes.
Well, there's a lot for women who tried infertility, and they try all these treatments, and they can't have children,
and so the short answer is yes. And I think when we have kind of our recruiting for volunteers as well, that's something that we kind of talk about and ask about, because if there's a mother who has a child who was sick or has been sick, that we can, as we recruit mothers in need of support, we can really match them up. Some mothers have a baby, but they're actually really struggling with their teenagers or their preteens, and so they want somebody to help identify that preteen stage, because they got the baby thing,
Right.
So yeah, I think it's really just about meeting somebody where they're at, not necessarily, the first few months and that first year of childbirth for the mom and the baby are really obviously really important. But again, if a mom's struggling with her 12-year-old and doesn't have support, or has support that's not helpful, then she has a place to turn.
Right. Why do you think, though, with the understanding that obviously with childbirth and the whole process of prenatal is this whole surge of something that happens to your body with your hormones?
Yeah.
So why do you think that it's still not something that doctors would sort of really know that obviously after you have a baby, your hormones are all over the place, that they would be able to prepare and be proactive in helping to define or, be more involved? Do you think it's because maybe after you have the baby, like you have to have a pediatrician and they come in, but you don't really, you have to go after 6 weeks, you go back. But do you think that where is that gap? Like, why is that not happening where it should?
I'm like fixing my skirt because I'll tell you in 1 second. The problem is, I think there's a number of prenatal visits that happen when a mother is pregnant, like significant. I can't think of the number right now because I'm on the spot, but so mother's pregnant, visits, if the mom goes, if mom has access to prenatal visits, that sort of thing. And then once the baby's born, 1 6-week checkup if she goes. And a lot of women don't go. They don't show up, especially if you don't have a C-section, or you have a vaginal birth, everything's fine, like that's fine. And postpartum depression, it can show up from anywhere from a few weeks to a few months.
Right.
So she might not be struggling at that point.
Or she might not know what to call it. She might, if it's her first child, she just might think this is the way it is.
Yeah, exactly. But then we go to the pediatrician side. So there's opportunity to screen at 6 weeks, a mom, for postpartum depression, and there's different scales and that sort of thing. And generally at the hospital, 2 years ago, the hospital I was screened, I have a really great OBGYN. At the 6 week I was screened, 2 weeks in between they called and asked how I was doing. Which is great up to 6 weeks, and then you just kind of like fall off the loop.
Right. But that's the same thing like with grief.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's really great the first 3 weeks after a loved one dies, but then it's like once all that's gone, and then you've got to sit with this.
Yeah.
So like it's you and this little person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I remember with my first son too. One of my friends was like, just wait for 3 months because nobody's gonna even check in.
Nobody's going to bring you dinner. Nobody's going to, right.
So then we go back to, okay, you have your prenatal visit or your postpartum visit and that sort of thing. So then it goes to, okay, well, now I'm seeing the pediatrician every month until baby is, I think, 9 months or so. And mom is not the patient of the pediatrician. And that's where it gets to be this gray area. So some pediatricians do screen, but they have a limited ability to help mom if she screens high, which was another reason, they might refer her back to her OBGYN, they might refer her to other programs. But a big reason for me as far as like educating people about Mission Motherhood is just, if you have a mom and you don't know where to send her, like tell her that we're here, And so I really have been trying to be more active in that pediatrician base because they're the ones who are seeing mom on a regular basis after she sees.
But you're also, part of the mission is also to bring awareness to the community because you have this acronym for RAISE. And one of the things that you say is, when everybody sees a new baby, it's all about the baby. And you said that before you acknowledge the new baby is to ask the mother, how are you doing? And that to check in with them. And that awareness that, to see that maybe she needs some attention,
Exactly.
So you're also that kind of awareness within the community itself.
Yeah, just understanding, the baby's great and we love babies, and I don't want to turn attention away from the importance of, childcare. But if mom's not healthy, like we can educate on safe sleep all we want. We can educate on everything all we want. But if mom is not in a good mental state to receive and retain that, and then have support surrounding it, then that's when those women fall through the cracks.
And it's very self-perpetuating because the mental health of the mother impacts the child, which then the child could have mental issues, which then impacts, so it's like a continuous circle.
And there's numerous studies that mothers with postpartum depression, and I don't want to scare anybody,
but they need to know the reality.
Yeah, that an extended postpartum depression, delayed bonding, that sort of thing, it does impact the mental health of the child. And there's ways to kind of recuperate and rebond.
Right, because babies are very malleable and they're still got a good plasticity there.
Yeah.
You got about till they're 5 to really hone in on that personality and relationship.
Yeah.
But also the idea of us really thinking about we don't sort of if we, there's lots of things, like if we looked at how much a mother would earn in the workforce for the work she does, and still, even with COVID, we saw how many women had to leave the workforce, and that deficit, and then how much still, even with involved partners, 80% of all childbearing still falls to the mothers. So it's also, part of it is recognizing that there's a lot for going around with mothers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, my mom always asks, like, how did it get this way? Like, how are women struggling so badly? And it's, I'm sure we could talk to Anne Marie and she could tell us really, the
but
history
don't you just think it's that they just, also, there was in the 70s when women joined the workforce in force, but I think also it is that maybe that people just suffered in silence.
Yeah. And we weren't set up, when you did receive, rights and liberties overnight, society didn't change overnight, and it's not going to change overnight.
No, it's not changing. We still make white women make 80 cents to the dollar, and African American women make 67 cents to the dollar of a man. So, we haven't, and we don't have extended or unlimited child, leave and paternal leave, and, and so.
Like, I feel like with women who are struggling, it's not on you. And I say this a lot too, like maternal mental health and a mother struggling, like, it's not just the mom's problem. It's her family's problem.
Well, it's also the community's problem.
It's society's problem, because if mom is not being taken care of, the whole family suffers, and then it just becomes this generational issue. And I say that again very broadly, knowing a lot of other issues, but at the same time, that's kind of where we go back to basics and taking care of the people that take care of us, And
well, it's always because women are always thought of as the caretakers, but sometimes the caretaker, even because we're also the sandwich generation. So now you're not only taking care of your kids, you're taking care of your parents, but who's taking care of you?
Yeah.
And also I think it's giving yourself permission. I really want to, I think that you, truthfully, reality or not, you had such high expectations, and the demands that you put on yourself, and nobody knows where that comes from. But we've got to say, okay, we've got to stop with just what you think it's going to be, or you should have to do it this way, and that's where I think this whole moms and women coming together, because then you have the mom shaming, like, you're at home and they're working, and so how do we do that?
Oh my goodness. I always think, like, giving people grace. And, a big part of it is with the advent of social media and that sort of thing. 10 years ago when I had my son, it was just, 10 years ago, social media looked very different than it did now. Right. And it was all about, everybody's happy, everybody's everything.
Well, I always joke. When you see Kate Middleton coming out of the hospital and her hair's done and her makeup's on, and, she's carrying this beautifully swaddled baby, you're like, okay, that's what it's supposed to be like. But that's not what it's like, And
I love the pictures of comparisons, and that's, that's great. But the women who are, and still in their,
special, the net mesh underwear after you've had a C-section,
but, we have to normalize motherhood. And I think over time, as social media has developed as well, there's been such a high expectation and perfectionism as what motherhood looks like, even from blogs, even from influencers and that sort of thing. And it's not okay. And I think now that conversation's kind of changing, because now somebody will post the picture of themselves postpartum, and but so you kind of start to normalize it, but we really only normalize it when we share our stories and when we share our experiences. And so I do think that conversation is changing, but it has a really, really long way to go.
And then how are you doing? Because now you're really enmeshed in creating this initiative. It's not just like doing the program, but really creating this whole structure for it. And you have 3 young boys, right, who are probably very active young boys. How do you balance it? Like, who's there to support you, and how do you create that tribe around you?
That is a really good question, because I, would love to be the one that says, I have this and X, Y, and Z laying out, because I'm also a creature of habit. So sometimes my work gets really in the way. And I would say that I have a really, really, I have a really supportive partner. I've had really supportive partners, through both all of my experiences. But I think that that is a huge help in understanding the mission that I'm trying to accomplish, understanding what we're trying to do, what we're trying to build. And so his understanding of that is paramount. I do have my family support. I'm probably the worst person to ask for help. So I'm
well,
also,
there's an irony there,
Yeah.
that you're, but maybe that's good, because maybe then you'll know how to get people to, maybe sometimes you don't have to wait till someone asks for help. Maybe you just have to be there when they're looking around, you know, sort of.
Exactly. Well, I just even recently, earlier this week, I had a light surgery, and I just, instead of not telling my girlfriends, like I might have done, because I didn't think it was a big deal, I was like, hey, just so you guys know, so you don't get mad at me after the fact, I'm having a surgery. And they were like, and they just kind of rallied, and, friends made dinner and sent little sweet packages and that sort of thing. And so
I'm sure offered to take your boys.
Yeah, and they offered. And so even sometimes the offering of help, even if you don't accept help, the first time or whatever, even the offering.
But you got to keep asking. I mean,
yes.
And we also, not only do you have to teach women that it's okay to need help, it's okay to take it.
Yeah.
Because we're the first that say, oh no, I got it, I can handle it all, and then until it gets to a crisis level.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And that's just something we have to learn ourselves and start to get comfortable with. But also, kind of going back to what we were talking about a while ago, is what we see, what we see as an example in our own community, in our own, social network.
Mm-hmm.
So if we, so we need to be an example to our kids and our family and our friends to kind of model that.
And we need to be examples that we're not perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
that's okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that you could, but I think it is hard. I mean, I think also there is something also about, if you have that New York kind of sense that self-reliance, and that you don't need anybody, and so it's sort of knowing that doesn't mean you're not capable, that doesn't mean that you're any less of the person you were. It's just, sometimes and maybe there's a grace to learn to accept help.
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
you need it, especially. So,
yeah.
Well, at the end of each And Good Company program, I ask guests the same 12 questions that were popularized by the novelist Marcel Proust from a popular Victorian game. Okay. So, what is your favorite word?
Grace.
What is your least favorite word?
No.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Helping others.
What turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Bad intention.
What sound or noise do you love?
Birds outside.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Crying.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Ooh. Like political, civil service.
What profession would you not like to do?
That is a good question. I don't know. I've pretty much done everything.
Okay. What do you consider your greatest achievement?
My kids.
Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
Princess Diana.
How would you like to die?
Oof. Happy.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
That's a good one. Like, good job, or like, job well done.
And thank you for bringing up to the attention and bringing to this table a meaningful and important conversation about mothers and mental health, and that as a community we need to be there for our mothers, because they are doing the most important job that there is.
Yes.
So
100%.
So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And you can learn more about And Good Company and all the other great conversations we have had at andgoodcompany.info. And we look forward to next week, when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.